The first 60 minutes after Asia goes dark are defined by shock and paralysis. Across a landmass that holds nearly 60% of the global population, every city, town, and rural village is silenced in an instant. The electric heartbeat of Tokyo, Seoul, Shanghai, Delhi, and Singapore stops at the same moment, plunging nearly 4.9 billion people into darkness. It is not a rolling blackout or a regional failure. This is the largest power loss in human history. Transportation is the first system to seize up. In megacities, fully automated subway trains stall in tunnels, leaving commuters trapped with no way to escape without assistance. Above ground, traffic signals blink out, causing collisions in intersections as drivers try to navigate the sudden void. Air traffic control centers across Asia are blinded, and pilots flying over some of the most congested skies on Earth are left to rely only on cockpit instruments and their own training. The busiest air corridors in the world are now scenes of confusion with no coordinated direction. Hospitals are next to feel the impact. By regulation, many major medical centers are equipped with backup generators, but these are designed for short-term emergencies, not for an outage across an entire continent. Ventilators, dialysis machines, and life support systems begin to draw down battery reserves. Surgeons caught in the middle of critical operations are forced to improvise under flashlights. Within the first hour, lives are already at risk, and the most vulnerable patients feel the immediate consequences. Communication breaks down just as quickly. Cell towers have a limited backup power, but the sudden demand overwhelms networks. Landline systems, which depend on powered exchanges, also fail. The internet, built on a dense mesh of servers, data centers, and undersea cables, flickers into silence from the eastern seaboard of Russia to the island nations of Southeast Asia. Families lose contact with one another. Governments cannot issue instructions. Emergency responders cannot coordinate rescues. For billions of people, the world suddenly contracts to the radius of their own neighborhood. Rumors spread in place of news. Streets fill with worried residents who stare into a sky that should be glowing with city lights but is now pitch black. The silence is unlike anything they have ever experienced. No hum of machinery, no electronic noise. Only the growing sound of voices filled with confusion and fear. In this moment, Asia has not just lost its power, it has lost its sense of stability. As the first rays of daylight sweep across Asia, the enormity of the crisis becomes impossible to ignore. Overnight, confusion transforms into full awareness. The largest continent on Earth has been completely unplugged. In cities like New Delhi, Manila, and Kuala Lumpur, water taps fall silent. Municipal pumps, dependent on constant electricity, can no longer push water through the vast networks of pipes. Families in high-rise apartments quickly realize that their homes, once connected to reliable utilities, have become isolated shells. Buckets and bottles are carried down stairwells as residents search for nearby wells or rivers. Sanitation begins to deteriorate just as quickly. Modern sewage treatment systems, which rely on continuous pumping and aeration, are at a standstill. Wastewater overflows threaten to seep into drinking supplies, creating the perfect conditions for outbreaks of waterborne diseases. The lessons learned in past disasters, from typhoons to earthquakes, show how rapidly cholera, dysentery, and other illnesses can re-emerge when sanitation fails. Food stability, too, is unraveling. Without refrigeration, millions of tons of stored meat, dairy, and vegetables begin to spoil. Large distribution centers that supply grocery stores in Seoul, Bangkok, and Ho Chi Minh City are filled with perishable goods now locked in a race against time. Fishermen and farmers, suddenly cut off from cold storage and transport, face the prospect of losing their livelihoods overnight. The social consequences begin to surface. In urban neighborhoods, people crowd into open markets, desperate to secure whatever food remains fresh. Some merchants raise prices as supplies dwindle, while others simply shut their stalls to avoid chaos. Law enforcement, hobbled by their inability to coordinate or communicate, struggles to maintain calm. Isolated patrols walk the streets, but without functioning radios or vehicles, their reach is limited, and the atmosphere is not yet outright panic, but the strain is visible everywhere. Families huddle on rooftops and in courtyards, whispering rumors and speculating about what has happened. For the first time, many realize this blackout is not a local issue, nor even a national one. It spans an entire continent. The thin fabric of order that holds the modern city together has been stretched to its breaking point, and with each passing hour, the world edges closer to unraveling. By the 12th hour, the crisis in Asia has already spilled far beyond its borders. The world's financial networks, built on constant communication and digital transactions, feel the shock in real time. In Tokyo, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, stock exchanges remain dark. Without even the possibility of opening, global investors are left staring at blank screens. Asia represents more than half of the planet's economic output, and its sudden silence sends ripples across the interconnected system. In Europe, the markets in Frankfurt and London begin the day in freefall. Automated trading systems designed to react instantly to volatility struggle to process an event that has no precedent: the disappearance of billions of consumers and the shutdown of entire manufacturing hubs. Within minutes, billions of dollars in value vanish, triggering waves of margin calls and forced liquidations. Energy markets feel the shock as well. Asia is the largest importer of crude oil, natural gas, and coal. Tankers bound for Chinese and Indian ports are suddenly without destinations. Prices swing wildly, initially plummeting due to the loss of demand, then spiking as traders realize that without Asia's refineries and factories, the global balance of energy production and consumption has collapsed. Shipping and logistics are paralyzed. The ports of Singapore, Shanghai, and Busan normally handle a massive share of the world's container traffic. With them frozen, insurance companies halt coverage on vessels headed into Asian waters. Shipments of electronics, textiles, and machine parts are stranded at sea, unable to unload. Even companies thousands of miles away in South America or Africa feel the disruption within hours as cargo contracts are voided and delivery schedules collapse. Banks in New York and London scramble to protect themselves, but with Asia's financial institutions disconnected, the chain of debt and credit grinds to a halt. Currency markets swing violently as investors flee from Asian currencies, which can no longer be traded reliably. The dollar and the euro surge in strength, but even that stability is an illusion. Without Asia's participation, the system itself is breaking. The financial world has experienced crashes before: the Great Depression, the global crisis of 2008, but never a disappearance of this magnitude. In half a day, the blackout in Asia has mutated into a global contagion. By the time Wall Street's opening bell rings, it is clear this is not a regional disaster. It is the first domino in a collapse that threatens the very foundation of the modern economy. At the 24-hour mark, the consequences of Asia's blackout extend from financial markets into the physical backbone of the global economy. The most immediate fracture comes in the supply chain, the invisible system that keeps factories running and store shelves full. Modern manufacturing depends on components that move across borders daily. Nowhere is this clearer than in the electronics sector. Taiwan produces more than half of the world's advanced semiconductors, chips that power everything from smartphones to cars. With its fabrication plants offline, assembly lines in Europe, North America, and beyond begin shutting down within hours. The automotive industry is next. Japanese and South Korean factories supply critical parts such as transmissions, batteries, and specialized steel. Without them, plants in Mexico, Germany, and the United States are forced to idle. A car today can require over 30,000 individual components, and if even one is missing, the line grinds to a halt. Pharmaceutical supply chains face the same fate. India and China together manufacture the majority of the world's generic medicines and key active pharmaceutical ingredients. Hospitals outside Asia suddenly find their inventories dwindling. Treatments for conditions such as hypertension, infection, and diabetes begin slipping into shortage, threatening lives far beyond the blackout zone. Global shipping tells a similar story. The port of Shanghai alone normally handles more than 40 million containers each year, making it the busiest in the world. With it and other Asian hubs like Singapore silent, shipping companies scramble to reroute vessels, but few alternatives exist at the same scale. Thousands of ships sit stranded, their cargo unable to reach markets. Air cargo is equally paralyzed. Major hubs in Hong Kong, Incheon, and Beijing together process millions of tons of goods annually. With these airports inoperable, everything from fresh produce to critical electronics, components cannot move, perishable goods spoil on tarmacs, and global retailers brace for empty shelves. By the end of the first day, the realization sets in. The blackout is not just a regional power failure, it has severed the arteries of global trade. The world has spent decades building a system where every region depends on Asia's factories, ports, and resources. In one day, that system has been switched off. After 7 days in total darkness, the disaster inside Asia has shifted from economic paralysis to a profound humanitarian emergency for nearly 4.9 billion people. Survival itself is now the central struggle. Food reserves in homes and shops are nearly gone. Without refrigeration, much of the stored food supply spoiled within the first few days. In countries such as India, China, and Indonesia, where hundreds of millions rely on daily markets rather than long-term storage, the shortages are immediate and severe. Urban centers, dependent on constant resupply, begin experiencing hunger riots as desperation overtakes order. Water is just as critical. Municipal pumps, which rely entirely on electricity, have now been dry for a week. In cities like Manila, Karachi, and Dhaka, families wait in endless lines for a chance to collect water from wells or rivers. Without proper sanitation systems running, those same rivers become contaminated, accelerating the spread of diseases such as cholera and dysentery. Healthcare collapses even further. Patients requiring refrigerated medicines like insulin or blood products are among the first casualties. Dialysis clinics, which depend on both clean water and reliable electricity, are forced to close, putting millions of lives at immediate risk. Vaccines, many of which must be stored cold, have already spoiled, leaving populations vulnerable to outbreaks. Rural areas suffer differently. In parts of South and Southeast Asia, irrigation systems powered by electricity no longer function. Crops that depend on pumps for water begin to fail, raising the specter of famine in the coming months. Farmers are unable to transport what food they do harvest, as fuel distribution networks also rely on electricity to operate. Governments attempt to maintain control, but with communication systems down, coordination is almost impossible. In some regions, the military is deployed to maintain order, yet even soldiers face the same shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. Social unrest grows, with the communities turning inward, relying on local networks rather than national leadership. Outside Asia, the international community struggles with the scale of the crisis. Delivering aid to nearly 5 billion people is an almost unimaginable challenge. Ports and airports remain frozen by the blackout, preventing mass shipments of food or medicine. Neighboring regions from the Middle East to Europe begin seeing waves of refugees attempting to cross borders in search of survival. At the 1 week point, the blackout is no longer just a technological failure. It is a humanitarian disaster of historic proportions, threatening to reshape not only Asia, but the entire global order. After 1 month without electricity, Asia has been transformed beyond recognition. Cities that once pulsed with life are now quiet. Broken landscapes where survival is the only priority. The absence of power is no longer seen as temporary. It has become the defining reality for nearly 5 billion people. The physical infrastructure of the power grid is in ruins. An abrupt continent-wide shutdown would cause cascading damage to transmission lines, substations, and generating stations. Restarting them requires not only technical expertise, but also complex coordination across national borders, which is now impossible. Even if the blackout ended tomorrow, rebuilding would take years, if not decades. The human toll mounts every day. Malnutrition spreads quickly as agricultural systems collapse. Without irrigation, fertilizer production, and refrigerated transport, famine becomes widespread in nations like Bangladesh and Cambodia, where food security was fragile even before the disaster. Disease outbreaks multiply in dense cities, with measles and tuberculosis re-emerging as vaccines and antibiotics run out. Mortality rises sharply, leaving entire regions without the skilled workers needed to keep even basic systems functioning. Outside of Asia, the rest of the world is deeply scarred. Supply chains have permanently broken. Factories in Europe and North America lie idle, waiting for parts that will never arrive. The global electronics sector has collapsed with Taiwan, South Korea, and China offline. Even medicine production in the West falters without critical components sourced from India. What once was a tightly interwoven global economy is now fragmented into regional survival zones. Governments worldwide respond by tightening control. Rationing is enforced on food, fuel, and medicine. In some nations, martial law is declared to quell unrest. Old alliances weaken as countries prioritize domestic survival over international cooperation. A new era of protectionism takes root, where self-sufficiency replaces globalization as the highest priority. And for Asia itself, the long-term outlook is bleak. Generations of progress in healthcare, education, and industry are erased in weeks. Entire populations are displaced as rural families abandon failing farmland, and cities empty out from starvation. Social structures fracture, replaced by small, localized communities that depend on direct resource sharing. modernity, with its reliance on a complex and fragile energy grid, has vanished almost overnight. The event becomes a dividing line in human history. Life is now spoken of as before the blackout and after the blackout. The memory of a connected, electrified world lingers, but the lived reality is one of scarcity, struggle, and rebuilding from the ground up. Humanity learns the hard truth: civilization is only as strong as the systems that power it, and without them, the world quickly unravels. The great darkness across Asia serves as a stark reminder. In our pursuit of growth and efficiency, we may have created a system too vast and too interconnected to survive a single catastrophic failure. And the question left behind is one that will haunt humanity for generations. If such a collapse ever came for the rest of the world, would we be any more prepared to endure it?